So today I want to talk a little bit about why is the simplest, most basic argument the best argument when it comes to logical reasoning? Well, because a complex, convoluted argument can often bury its core idea, right? It becomes this moving target that changes and shifts, right? Making it hard to test its logic. So a simple argument, however, is a clear target that's easy to pin down and evaluate. So therefore, the simplest, right, the most basic argument is the best, not because it's always correct, but because it is the most testable, falsifiable, robust form of reasoning. So this is a philosophical principle, right, known as Occam's razor, also known as the law of parsimony, right? So it's a problem-solving principle that, when faced with explanations, the simplest one with fewest assumptions is most likely to be correct. So simplicity over complexity. So I'm not saying I always stick to this principle myself, right? A lot of time I'm just sharing my observations and opinions, right? But I think this is a particular line of thinking, right, that is important because it can help us navigate today's information overload and sharpen our logical reasoning skills. Now, let's say we want to build a specific knowledge of something, right? We need a solid foundation to start with. And that foundation should start with the simplest, most basic, and most undeniable facts or premises before we can go to the next stage. So this is the most important step to ensure that you're not building on, shaky foundation. So this foundational premise, right, should aim to be as reliable and as valid as possible. So that's why it should be simple and basic, which brings us back to the Occam's razor principle, right? Now, reliable and valid is something very important for a strong philosophical argument, just as they are for a scientific experiment. So for a science experiment to reach credible conclusions, right, it requires reliable and valid measurements, right, which is sound data built on parsimonious experimental designs. That means simple, clear premises. Right? So what's the difference between validity and reliability, right? They sound a little bit similar, right? So there are two distinct but essential qualities for good measurement in science. So reliability refers to consistency. If a measurement is reliable, it gives the same result under consistent conditions, but that doesn't mean it's correct. So let's say a broken scale can show a wrong measurement consistently. Therefore, it's reliable, but it's still wrong, right? Because it's broken. Validity refers to accuracy. It asks questions such as, are you actually measuring what you intend to measure? So the more complex an argument is, the more variables and assumptions you add, the higher the risk that you are measuring something else. So a simple argument or hypothesis isolates a single testable factor. For an experiment to be conclusive, right, its measurements must be both reliable and valid. So to achieve that, we must set our premises as simple, as basic as it can be, right? So back to the philosophical principle, the law of parsimony. So this principle encourages scientists to design experiments that test one variable at a time. So science requires reliable and valid measurements built on parsimonious experimental designs to reach credible conclusions. So philosophy, logic requires sound arguments built on true and basic premises to reach logical, certain conclusions. So in logic, right, if your starting assumptions are weak or complex or unproven, right, the entire argument is vulnerable because the foundation is weak. Therefore, the simplest premises are the best because they aim for reliability and validity. Most basic premises are the best because it aims at the goal of being reliable and valid. Therefore, a commitment to simplicity makes it easier to achieve reliable findings. Now, we all know we live in an era of constant news alerts, right? Social media feeds and endless content. You can easily curate your news consumption to align with your existing beliefs because the media landscape is just so fragmented now, right? We're witnessing pretty much the disastrous effects of that. Right? We used to think reliability, right, was the main challenge with the information source, like a source that, constantly contradicts itself with shaky claims, right, and makes wrong predictions all the time and all that. But now I feel reliability isn't even the hard part anymore, right? A source can be consistently wrong, but still very consistent in its claims, right? And it doesn't seem to matter anymore, right? But as we discussed, consistency, reliability does not mean valid, right? You need both to have something, I would say, trustworthy. So when faced with a complex, emotionally charged argument, right, your first task is probably best to boil it down to its basic premises, right? Statistics, for example, are often used as sword for the truth, right? It's like automatic proof whenever you're claiming something, right? As long as you quote statistic, right? That's it. Your point must be valid, right? So statistic can be reliable data, but this is where arguments can still fall apart, right? Someone uses a statistic reliable data, but applies it to a completely different conclusion, right? Invalid argument. The data is reliable, but the argument is not valid. So in the end, it's a false claim propped up by reliable data, making the conclusion meaningless anyway, right? So unlike in science, which has this strict code of conduct, right? These information sources will never say conclusion is inconclusive, right? How would that generate a wave of, emotional reaction? Isn't that what they need, right? To trigger your emotions so you respond in a very emotional way, right? These are one of the tools I would say, right, perhaps for intellectual survival, right, in a way. So by demanding basic arguments and questioning the validity of the reliable data thrown at us, right, constantly, maybe we can build an internal defense against this type of manipulation. However, our mind has a tendency to mistake complex jargon-filled explanations as the more intelligent or credible explanations, right? So we like to think either that's too simple to be true or this doesn't sound as convincing because it seems so simple and obvious, right? That's where the conspiracy theories, come in, right? That's why they often very complicated, right? Conspiracy theory, they're rarely simple, actually. So we talk a lot about echo chambers and confirmation bias, right? It's like this very urgent matter in our fragmented information outlets right now. And sometimes, right, in debates, you hear people just throwing out many rapid arguments with lots of different angles, right? Bombard you with this information. And for a mind that is already challenged by echo chambers and confirmation bias, right? This can be another layer of overwhelm that shuts down critical thinking entirely, right? So we're so easy to surrender or default to our pre-existing biases. Now imagine on top of that, we add a bunch of variables and makes it as confusing as it can be, right, when it comes to the core idea. Now, the key difference is that an opinion is a personal feeling or preference, right? Like thinking a movie is boring, right? It doesn't need proof. What I'm trying to say here is setting up one of few, standards, right, for judging opinions that claim to be true. Reliability, validity, logical soundness, parsimony are like a set of objective standards that can be used to judge quality of an opinion, right? When that opinion makes a claim about truth, right? So I'm more like arguing for methodology, right, rather than stating a preference. So in a world full of opinions, right, we should prioritize those that are testable, right? Falsifiable and built on reliable, valid foundation. So what I'm saying is, if you want me to take your opinion seriously as a fact, here are some ways we can check it, right? Principles like reliability, right? Is it consistent? And the validity, is the evidence actually relevant? Two separate, strong logical claims from weak ones. It is a precious thing that in science, right, you often get a result that is simply inconclusive, right? Such as based on this solid evidence, we cannot be sure, we need to learn more, right? Forcing a conclusive answer from inconclusive data, right, is the very type of invalid reasoning, right? And acknowledging inconclusive results is the hallmark of honest, reliable, and valid thinking. I'm sorry, this video is my first YouTube video. Might be a little bit boring, but I promise there will be more interesting subjects and diverse subjects coming soon, right? My goal is to upload at least 3 long videos on YouTube each week, and I will cover more interesting subjects, following this. But I just wanted to talk about this in this video particularly, and thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe and comment, share your thoughts. I read all the comments all the time, and I find all your comments very thought-provoking. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And that's it. Have a great weekend.